So I've been reading some history lately, and it turns out the Europeans wanted to trade with Asia. And to do that, they sailed around Africa and went west, hoping to go through where America turned out to be, which seemed really stupid to me. Like, why go around Africa? Why do all of that effort if you can just go through here? Are they stupid? That is the general idea behind my Venice campaign. Play a merchant republic in Italy, unite Italy, and secure a path to Asia through the Middle East, using said path to make all of the money. Anyway, like, subscribe, you know the drill, and let's get into the save. So yeah, here we are. It is the 1st of January, 1823. Technically got to the money cap, we'll mention that in a second. A bit earlier than that, but I ended up playing 5 extra years trying to desperately make the last million before I realized that actually the money cap is apparently at 100 million, and I was sitting at plus 100k, well over 100k for 5 years, without building any building, without doing any kind of activity, and I realized, okay, I think the money keeper's at 100 million and they're just not telling me. But nevertheless, this is my Italy over here. You can see that my capital is Venice. And indeed, by the culture map mode, we'll be touching on the culture map modes later. This is the primary culture map mode. And this is the location culture map mode. There's still a couple Italian minorities out and about. You can tell in the more recent conversion places, but everything is nice and Venetian, as is apparently this province. I've just realized that. Why is... Oh. Is that because there's literally one? Oh, there's one person living here, right? How did that happen? How are there? I'm going to stop asking questions. All right, that mild tangent aside, I promise I'm not responsible for whatever happened in that location over here. Blame the Ottomans. No, that's not even the Ottomans' land. Oh, it is the Ottomans' land. Okay, but anyway, blame the Ottomans. Those are my Italian borders. And you may be also wondering what a part of my previously described strategy would also require me securing so much of, well, Greece. And the truth of the matter is that I also wanted it to secure my sea trade routes from Venice into said Middle East, right? Because I could route the sea routes through here, but as they were approaching these tiles, well, they were getting away from my maritime presence. And if I owned this coastline, this made the trade part quite a bit easier. So yeah, I set up a bit of a buffer state with the Ottomans up here. I had to fight them for it, of course, but that was the idea behind Greece as well, just to have access to this trade, and also it's helpful with trading with the Ottomans as well. Can't say no to that. And then I continued to secure my trade routes by grabbing control over the island of Cyprus, and Cyprus was also very, very helpful as the staging ground and invasion onto my Middle East outpost. And of course, the most critical part of this Middle East outpost is the town of Aqaba over here. That, of course, was critical to actually have access to Asia and all of my beautiful, beautiful trade. Now, there were some 2 house rules I've played this campaign with. First of all, and this is going to sound like a very weird one, but during Parliament you get a Parliament request from the burghers that asks you to give a permanent Parliament seat to a location. That is a very strong request, because if you say no, the burghers get minus 20 loyalty, and that's very annoying. But if you say yes, the burghers are happy and you get 25 Parliament support. Well, if we look at Parliament seats, there's the House of Parliament, but I'm not given a single one out this campaign, and this has been very, very painful for burger loyalty, but that's just a house rule to make it slightly more difficult, I guess. But also, I didn't want to... Let me just pop out of the Venice market just to secure that. Yes, in all markets, I haven't given out any Parliament seats, but nevertheless, I'm not sure why I decided to do it. I guess just as a little bit of an extra spicy challenge for no real reason. You know what, I just decided that giving out Parliament seats, not what I'm about this campaign. I've also decided no selling art. I think art and selling art at the moment is way too strong and can really kickstart your economy early. And I know I'm playing Venice, so it's a bit easy for me to kickstart my economy early anyway. But no, I wanted to do a no selling art campaign, and instead I have hoarded all of my art in Venice itself, so there is a pretty stupendous 270 bits of art inside of it. But yeah, those were the 2 house rules I've played with, and I've chosen some very interesting borders over here inside of the Middle East colony. Why? Well, it's because of how 2 things work. First of all, the reduced paperwork in province and the increased control in province, right? For those unaware, every single location is then made part of a, well, province, right? And then these provinces go into areas. And these were kind of a bit bigger entities, and some areas are certainly bigger than others. Tuscany's quite a big area, so on and so forth. But some areas are also quite sad, like Murcia is a very sad area, Andalusia, Granada is a bit bigger compared to it. The Balearics are a pretty sad area. Carnolia is a pretty sad area compared to all of Croatia and all of Emilia-Romagna, for example. That's just kind of how it works. They're a bit variable in sizes. But the most insane one is the Levant. That's just one area. That's an insanely sized area. This is a huge, ludicrously sized area. And I was wondering, well, how can I abuse this? And the answer, of course, is with two cabinet interactions, one to reduce paperwork, which, for those unaware, is a hegemon action. It does require you to be, I do believe, economic hegemon, yes, and it gives you even more money. Well, it gives you production efficiency, which in this case gives me on the entirety of the Levant, checking Jerusalem here, a pretty nice extra 7% reduced paperwork production efficiency, which is wonderful. This is great. But also, of course, it lets me increase control. And that is very, very strong, as you can probably tell. Now, with railways, this is a bit more redundant, but it does mean that I'm basically able to get to 100% control in the Levant a lot earlier. Like a lot earlier than I should. I mean, I frankly had more control of the Levant than I had over my own internal territories in Italy, which is fascinating. But yeah, in essence, this allowed me to set up my trade as such, where I was importing, as you can see, pepper and cloves in pretty ludicrous quantities, and then some I kind of gave up later, into San Giovanni di Acri. And then I was able to use auto trades to basically export it elsewhere. Although I did have to set, for example, Athens was, and still kind of is, starving for a lot of the time, and so I had to import food there. And I guess now that we are in the market map mode, I have to address the one big province situation. See, I had stacked a lot of market attraction. But the problem is at the moment, you get market attraction based on building staffed levels, and Venice has a couple of those. Venice has a couple building staff levels because it's a megapolis, and I upgraded it to ludicrous extent. And I will also say at this point, you've added a lot of buildings to the game, but you've also not really added that many construction centers. I've started building these textile mills and things when they were unlocked. They're not going to finish by the end of the game. We need more construction slots if you want us to actually use these buildings that you added, right? It's great that I can build 330 glass mills in Venice. It's really cool and great for my economy, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, Paradox, like I physically don't have the time inside of the game to build all of these if I'm building them 9 at a time. That weird complaint aside, yeah, at the moment, Venice has kind of just absorbed Europe and ruined it for everyone else. Because if we check market access, yeah, it's very red in Europe and southern France and everything. And I want to also really point out that not only have I circled Bordeaux, France has a lot of internal market protection. Because France owns a subject, one little subject in Wales over here, and indeed they were able to put it into the Paris market. So they have a lot of defensive pressure. But Venice has just such a stupid amount of market attraction that it was able to absorb Genoa, and more importantly, my previous best trade node, you guessed it, Ragusa. And you can tell it used to be my previous best trade node because it was the birthplace of global trade, giving it extra market attraction. At this point, unfortunately, all Ragusa is currently doing is desperately trying to import potatoes because it's in a constant state of famine, as the only thing inside of Ragusa, the trade node, is, well, Ragusa, and it doesn't produce enough food for itself. Which is kind of a sad fall-off for the literal birthplace of global trade, but that's the state we're in. It is so entirely dwarfed by Venice. As a market center, it's not even funny anymore. Like, what was the point of all my internal market setup with things like Rome and Genoa if all of them are just becoming part of Venice? To the extent I will even say that, yes, I'm economically sabotaging Europe with all of this, and that's really funny, but I'm economically sabotaging myself. Like, I would rather have these provinces be closer to Genoa for market access preference. And same for Rome. Palermo managed to hold on for a bit, and I will be also clear, these markets are all insanely strong. Like, Athens is pushing through to Constantinople, is bordering Constantinople over here. St. Giovanni di Acri has no right to push this far into any direction. Like, all of my markets have an insane amount of defensiveness, and I think nothing exemplifies it better than the Genoese market, which used to have all of this land in the south before Venice showed up and took it, of Genoa. But Genoa still owns a couple sea tiles randomly, but they also have exactly one tile for Genoa that they took. Because Genoa has beelined Brest. For whatever reason, Genoa really loves Brest. And frankly, I understand it. I love Brest too. It's still rather funny that we just have this one tile of of Brittany just randomly popping out over here in Genoa, and then the rest of Europe is just succumbed to the great power of the Venice market. It's kind of useful, honestly, though, because by having access to these coast tiles, the Venice market is able to trade with things like Edinburgh and Oslo. Helpful, but you get the point. And in fact, because it's reached Bordeaux, the Venice market has the ability to trade with the Canadians. Yep, The Canadians are in market range. But of course, its main trading partner is San Giovanni di Acri, which has trade access to China. It can reach China, and more importantly, it can also reach India. So that's where all my money is coming from. How much money? Well, you've gotten a bit of spoilers there. We've reached the money cap. Not quite 1 billion, which was my initial goal. I do think it makes for a better title. But did you know how insane the difference between 1 billion and 1 million is? Because 1 million is quite reachable, but 1 billion is such a ludicrously higher number. It's very hard to communicate just how much more 1 billion is compared to 1 million. But nevertheless, I was still able to get to 100 million, a huge goal, with a frankly still, I would argue, ludicrous economy. I'm making 65,000 each month from trade. This is stupid. This is an absolutely stupid amount, and I'm trading cloves and pepper, sure, but I'm also trading chili. I'm trading ludicrous amounts of lumber for all of my domestic industries in Venice. Quite a bit of tools. A lot of gold has been imported because, obviously, weapons, saffron, even steel. Quite a bit of a steel trade going on. But yeah, no, I mean, each one of these individually would be absolutely insane, right? Why are we? I thought I banned slavery. How are we trading slaves? I need to have a chat with the merchants about those. But no, like making 500 ducats from ivory would be impressive enough, but it's like so far down on the list. We're making thousands trading in tar. Good stuff. Yeah, I mean it's a trade build, right? We're a council of 10, which has decreased our noble power and given us possible gun reform and monthly republican tradition. I've just realized it doesn't buff my trade. But what does buff my trade is my merchant republic government reform, which gives me trade income. My harbour administration, which gives me proximity impacts reports, which is very, very nice, and also naval governors, which are nice. Signoria of country. Yeah, it's meant to be Signoria of Venice, but this kind of broke when I formed Italy, so I just have Signoria of country, and this is funny to me. Giving us progress to free trade, crown power, trade capacity, and merchant trade maintenance, all wonderful stuff. The bank ledger system, merchant maintenance efficiency, again, is great for us. We have the Magistrato alla Sanita, which is just population growth, I'll be honest, and disease resistance. We have, of course, the administration of shipyards, more naval stuff, more naval governors, more proximity cost report, and harbour capacity and everywhere is great. And of course, we have the Council of 40 for even more trade capacity and progress to free trade. Now, this government reform was actually abolished and replaced by the Signoria of Country, but turns out you could just kind of put it back after it's abolished. Like, nothing stops you running it again, so I did. And then I picked up some RGO and max food size, and that's nice. That's just another thing Italy gets. So that's neat. And there's my government setup over here. Of course, all the other estates are oppressed. But before you say that, wow, I'm running this as an absolutist monarch. No. To be clear, I'm a liberal country. And in fact, when you look at my laws and you look at my estate laws, yeah, I favour the common people near the end, sure. But I've curtailed the burghers. I've secularised the state. I've curtailed the commoners. And I've reduced the crown to a figurehead position. And I've curtailed the nobility. Everyone in my country is oppressed, including the monarch. All of them. All of them are oppressed to the most powerful thing of all, money. All of this is in service of making more money. Which is a very weird setup. I mean, I guess I arguably favor the common people the most, but I just wanted to tax them all. That's the reason I favor the common people, just to get more taxes out of them. So I wouldn't say that's necessarily me actually favoring them. I'm just favoring their bank accounts. So it's a fascinating country, and just to go through values again, very centralized, very innovative, very spiritualist. And I think spiritualist is better than humanist, because yes, you have to convert everything, but once you do, plus the tolerance to the true faith is quite a bit of people happiness. Although unfortunately, my ruler, in a very poetic way, is an entrepreneur for selling efficiency. This is huge. I love this, but he's also a sinner. So very Venice coded. You know what? I'll just say that, very Venice coded. But no, I am max centralization, max innovative, max spiritualist, plutocratic, free subject, as free trade as I could get with like 7 trade nodes, which gives me minus 0.35 pushed since all of my market centers. Very conciliatory. Well, relatively speaking, I mean, I didn't really bother going that way, and I didn't really look at quantity offensive either. Full naval, of course, full capital economy, full communalism, because we're all communally dedicated to the goal of making money. This is just good for estate satisfaction, equilibrium, and also revoke privilege cost, and once that's all done, it's also very nice for dealing with rebels. Yeah, it does decrease pop migration speed, but I'll be honest, I had enough pop migration to upgrade everything I wanted into a city anyway, so that wasn't an issue. And individualism does actually decrease estate satisfaction, so going max individualism is kind of bad, to be honest, because it's like -5 estate satisfaction, -5 tax, right? Inward, I've pushed as best as I can, but it's a very hard thing to push. And of course, I'm fully liberal, because estate satisfaction equilibrium is just great. Parliament requests to issue support needed is also very, very nice, would recommend. Now, I am fully liberal, of course, but just because, of course, this country is entirely an oxymoron in its entire construction, we do have strict censorship. So we are very liberal, but we do have strict censorship. However, once the things that we have censored have been censored, we do have a free press. So just to be clear, we do have strict censorship in our very liberal democracy, but we also have an entirely free press. Stop asking questions. Also, yes, the king is reduced to a figurehead. I feel like there's just kind of some shadow council actually running the state, which is correct. The shadow council is me. I am the shadow council, pulling all the strings, making all of the money. But it's almost ironic just how weird this country is when you take a step back to look at it. Either way, I know what you're here for. You're here for the graphs. And you can also immediately tell by looking by my historic economic base, looking at my tax base as well, that I realized by around 1800s with a calculator, if it lets me load in, that yes, around here, that I would have enough money to reach my 100 million ducat goal, at which point I shoved the game on speed 7 and just waited to get enough money. Unfortunately, that's actually a very bad idea, not microing your economy constantly, especially in a very trade-based economy, and not doing all of that stuff manually does lead to eventual declines, and that was quite a bad decline. But then, of course, it's still, dev increases, pop growth, all those things happen, and so it did end up recovering. So they, you can see the part where I switched from speed 3 to speed 5 in the tax base and the and the economic base as it's going. But yes, very nice exponential graph. Same for the population. Thankfully, there's not too much micro involved with that. You can see also on the population graph, which is find kind of funny, where I'm doing the early conquering and the expansion is still a bit weird in the early conquering bumps, right? But then here you can see me release a subject, wait, and then reintegrate the subject in this little like weird divot here. And then you can see the second round of the Black Death that hit me in the 20s. So that kind of sucked. Like too many people died. So ripped 10% of the population. But yeah, we were fine. And then it just kind of kept going up. There was a second, I guess not second, third round of Black Death over here. You can see the divot, but we were just fine. And yeah, 68 million people living inside of this very, very beautiful Venice. And I guess for the final things, well, let's quickly go through technologies. Yeah, turns out having 99% and ludicrous high control for pretty much the whole game is very, very strong, because 25% tech speed is very, very good. So I've had very good tech speed for the whole thing. My Age of Traditions, I've done 86 out of 86. Renaissance, I've done 96 out of 114. Discovery, I've done 98 out of 118. Reformation, I've done 84 out of 113. I'm just missing the techs that are very relevant. Like, I don't need to research a pottery workshop if I've got the higher thing. I guess Pearl's output would not be useless, but, a lot of the other things here are pretty useless at this point. I don't need culture capacity, everyone's Venetian. Age of Absolutism, I've done most of them, 102 out of 124. And Age of Revolutions, I mean, the game is coming to a close, but I've also just finished that as well for all intents and purposes. So techs are done. And again, just to be really rubbing it at this point, the religions of the locations are very Catholic. Oh yeah, I got annoyed at Tunis raiding me for slaves. So I showed up with my boats, blockaded them for like 20 years, destroyed their navy, and then forced them to become Catholic. I'm not sure if I can do that by just blockading them for long enough, but yeah. It worked. They stopped raiding me for slaves. So yeah, if you ever get annoyed at being raided for slaves, show up outside of their borders with a bunch of big boats and then make them embrace Jesus. Surprisingly functional method. I mean, it works, right? So yeah, no, the Tunis is Catholic. That was my fault. And yeah, also, of course, I did make the Greeks Catholic as well. They were Sunni before, but I did make them not Greek. I made them Venetian Catholics. So that's all sorted as well. My proximity map mode is pretty neat, as is my market access, apart from all the other people's market access, as I've ruined, as you can see later here as well. But the control map mode, it's very blue. I have 100% control pretty much everywhere, because I have so much ludicrous control over here. And Greece is probably the hardest part for me to, well, control, but that's mainly because this isn't just one big province, unlike the Levant. So yeah, that's kind of why. And even here, I still have quite a few provinces on 100. You might be thinking, why don't I just put down more governors? Well, it's because most of these things, okay, this one is proximity like 74, but some of these places, like there's a governor here in Athens, but a location like this one is getting its proximity not from Athens, right? It's still getting its proximity from Venice. It's just that efficient for me to push proximity over the sea. So, like, arguably I can get another 6 proximity here if I do some governor stuff around, but it really is not going to matter. So for all intents and purposes, 100 control, and this is also 100 control of me restraining myself. If I'd conquered all of Europe, this would have been a lot easier, and I certainly could have. Now, I also want to mention, how do you deal with complacency? The answer is very simple. When I was conquering Italy, I had a bit of a coalition, and it's actually still here. And you may be wondering, how bad is the coalition? Well, according to the Duchy of Venice, they are going to forgive me. Let's see that. They are going to forgive me in 2095. So they're going to forgive me in 70 years from real lifetime. Yeah, they're not leaving the coalition. The good news is, though, is that they are an entirely irrelevant nation. 58,000 regulars, please, that's half of one of my stacks. I'll be fine. But they do sit in a constant coalition against me. And this is great, because having a coalition against you means you basically have minus 0.05 monthly complacency. So you don't get complacency. Yeah, just get a coalition against you if you're struggling with complacency, then it's fine. Why are people complaining about this mechanic? It's that easy. But all weird implementations aside, I will say I still had quite a bit of fun on Venice here. I think the Italy content at this point is pretty good. You have the whole Ghibellines and that whole situation right kicking off with the Pope. That was pretty neat. I thought that was pretty good. And then the Italian Wars, I was actually pleasantly surprised with how deep the Italian Wars go and all of the stuff around the Italian Wars. So I did enjoy doing that, especially compared to the released Italian Wars. It's night and day. The Italian Wars at this point are very nice. I enjoyed playing through those. I was, of course, able to win the Italian Wars as Italy, which is fascinating. But, I wouldn't say speedrun Italian unification, but certainly going for Italian unification. So I guess that shouldn't be too surprising. But yeah, though, that's the state of that. Would definitely recommend a Venice or Milan or Florence playthrough. Or even if you are if you just want a power trip, play Naples. It's by far the strongest within the Italy area. But I actually recommend not doing that because I think Naples makes for a very good mini boss when you're uniting Italy inside of your campaigns, and I think that's an interesting dynamic. And there's certainly other nations you can try, like Pisa, if you want definitely more of a challenge, but with some more unique modifiers. Pisa, for example, gets, not the birthplace of manufactories, but they have a unique building here that they get for just being Pisa, which I think is pretty neat. The Porto Piziano in Pisa has stuff and it has effects if it's the market center as well. And then, yeah, good stuff all around. Like, I'd recommend giving Pisa a playthrough. If you are looking for something more challenging in the Italy area as well, they have some unique things, including plus 5% early literacy, which is neat. And you can also just form Florence. And Sicily is also an interesting pick as well, but you're definitely up against strong Naples right off the bat. But yeah, Italy, would recommend a playthrough yourself. You don't necessarily have to do what I did. It's very strong to go trade with Asia through the Middle East early. It's incredibly powerful. That's how I made all of the money. Would recommend, but you definitely don't have to do that. And there's not too much more to say, apart from one very, very final point. It's almost nostalgic for me to say, but what I've observed in this game is, of course, Castile, which did not form Spain because Morocco held onto these provinces, then Morocco allied very powerful Ottomans, and that was kind of the end of that. But Castile, with their colonial endeavors, turned around, and they colonized Siberia. And I'll be honest, this doesn't make any sense, sure, but frankly, it's nostalgic, because Castile would colonize Siberia all of the goddamn time in early EU4, and they've managed to reinvent the Castile colonizes Siberia bug from first principles for EU5, and I love that. It's almost nostalgic. Now, in EU4, they would colonize Siberia and it would be a worthless 3-dev wasteland Arctic terrible province, right? And that's still the case in EU5, but of course, it's even worse now because they have no market access. So even on something like Ivory that I clicked on here, that should be nice, that's reduced, the output of this Ivory is reduced by 100% because they have zero market access. And zero market access destroys it. Like, the tax base here is zero. And it is zero on everything. So you may be wondering, why is Castile colonizing it? And I've just clicked on the answer. There's gold here. They just see the gold and like, yep, need to get the gold. And this entire expedition down into the depths of Siberia from the coastline, why is this all happening? They found silver. At some point, the memes write themselves, Castile. Like, we don't need to go into the depths of Siberia to secure the potential of this one silver mine. Like, it's fine. It's really fine. We don't need to do that, Castile. Please stop. Please stop colonizing Siberia. It's nostalgic, but we don't have to. Please stop. Ludwig the Fourth, we don't need to go into Siberia. Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, no, that is indeed all the time I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching, with a special thank you to Ark, Solus, Lemon, Lozendica, Castan, Hatan, Star72, The Awesome Rabbit, Best for Gaming, Gramil, Flavia, Lebrule, W. Hayes, Sov, Anthony35, AC Napa, Conspiracy Pizza, Yukata, Danray, Marvi, Jack, Ryland, Stuart Allen, Andrew Black, Nebula, Zentronic, Twinit, Aquabird, Yakiman, Barak, Lord Swarfin, Tyke Von, and Klopkog.